time to armor up and level out. Listen up and hear what we're about.
Welcome back to Armor Radio. Josh here with Dusty.
Hey man, thanks for having me back.
And returning once again, Dr. Jill Pierce.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Our last episode was episode, remind me?
18.
18, okay, episode 18. And we talked about primarily anxiety. 3 different ways to actually fix or improve your anxiety. And that has done really well.
Yeah, like a top 5 episode for us.
Yeah. And we wanted to sort of revisit some of these things today. But this time, we're going to go a little bit different. And we were going to talk about Rhabdo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
And we were going to do that because you've recently experienced a bout of rhabdomyolysis on your own.
Yeah, it was, I guess, end of July, early August. So.
Okay.
Will you explain to the listeners what it is?
Yeah. So essentially, rhabdomyolysis is a rapid breakdown of the muscle tissue where you end up having damage to the liver and or kidney. You're basically dumping out byproduct of the muscle. I guess the severity of it can vary. I didn't quite have the extreme symptoms that some people have. The Coca-Cola urine, I think, is the big thing that people will, everyone's looking for that one. I actually did not have that. But then you also get extreme muscle soreness, and it is extreme.
Yeah. Like to the point where range of motion is limited.
Range of motion is limited. Your ability to contract the muscle is limited. I think mine was in my abs, which was really, I felt like an odd place to get it. I think you hear about it often in arms, bicep type thing. Yeah. And I'm talking more specifically right now to people that get it that are in the athletic realm. There are other ways to get it metabolically, but that's, I think, outside of really our conversation today, like a fall or something like that can happen. But to take it back, the extreme muscle soreness. So mine happened after an intense core workout, and I couldn't contract my abs. I couldn't do a toe to bar. So for CrossFit people, toes going up to the bar, which is a pretty strong movement for me, for 10 days. I couldn't physically lift my legs up, and I had to pull myself over out of bed because my abs were so sore. Yeah. So when I say extreme muscle soreness, it's it's a different level of soreness.
So I remember when this kind of set in and we were working through it, it sort of came about and we started chatting about it. How did you know for sure that that's what it was? So you said one of the symptoms, well, first off, you get some sort of muscle crush. So that's a trauma. You can pretty much guarantee that something like that might happen. But if it's not that, what are ways that might not be the discolored urine, or that athletes could understand that that's what they have? Because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'd say the 3 things, until I got the blood work is what kind of confirmed the labs that I got. But the 3 things for me were the extreme muscle soreness, fatigue, and then inability to recover from a workout. So I would come in and do something that I didn't think would be much. Maybe did some banded dips and was getting extreme tendonitis in my elbow. Okay. And then would rest, come back in a couple of days later, I'd do something, and then it would be my knee. So it was just these very clear signs that my body wasn't recovering. Yeah. And I was holding on to lactic acid. My whole body just felt it was full of just soreness that I couldn't flush.
What was when you did finally go to get your blood work done? What's the values that we need to pay attention to that might be a red flag?
Yeah, so it's creatine kinase is the big one. So CK or CPK, I think is I think that's the hallmark one, and anything over 5,000, I believe, is diagnostic. Yeah. The other thing you'll see with it is an increase in your liver enzymes, so AST and ALT. And so those were the 3 things I didn't have, and I was actually just going in for routine blood work is how I ended up finding it. And I was tired from the rhabdo. I was fatigued, so I was like, well, I might as well do that routine blood work because I was supposed to rest for a couple of days. So that's actually, I found it incidentally on my blood work is how that showed up.
Yeah, because you mentioned like 10 days out, and
yeah, I would have been, I think, somewhere between 10 and 14 days out, and my CK was still, I think it was like 5,500 or 6,000, something like that, and my liver enzymes were over 200, which is typically what you see with things like liver cirrhosis, liver cancer. Like they were through the roof, and so those are the things that were like, okay, something's going on.
Yeah. So so a lot of the times that we'll find out with an athlete that this happens to. It happens because we go from 0 to 60. Like I don't do anything, and then I want to run a marathon tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay, that's silly.
Good point.
That's probably not wise to do something like that.
Yeah.
But with you before, how many days a week did you train? That's question number one. And then question number two is about your average intensity.
Yeah, so I was actually coming out of a pretty high intensity training phase. I was in June probably working out CrossFit style workouts 5 days a week with 2 extra evening sessions of kind of like accessory work and mountain biking once a week. So
I was saying there was that mountain biking in there too.
So I was actually kind of like peak fitness for me. Like I was feeling strong. I wasn't recovered. Like we'll talk about this, but like there were some clear signs for me like now in hindsight that I can go back and put the pieces together. But as far as my ability before it happened, I was pushing pretty hard and felt pretty good. I was still, my strength was still increasing. I was feeling good with like high intensity workouts. But yeah, my level of training was pretty.
So
pretty solid.
And this is different for every athlete. There's your maximum recoverable volume. You were touching up against that each and every week with never taking any time off each and every day. Yeah. Were there any other things that you can point back to, like added on top of that? I wasn't hydrating, or I wasn't eating right, or I wasn't sleeping right, or yeah, for sure. So there was a pretty high stress, like like January through or December through kind of like April of that year. Okay. So I was taking care of my dog that had cancer, not getting a lot of sleep. So my sleep quality had declined a good bit. And then I just, that natural season, I started increasing my training, probably in April, like Murph prep time. And it felt good. And then I had a little bit more time, but my sleep cycle hadn't gone back to normal. I started using the Oura Ring to track sleep. I wasn't getting much REM sleep. I was maybe getting about 6 hours of sleep, which for me isn't enough. I need closer to 8 to feel really good and recovered. Yeah. So on top of all of the hard training, that was relatively normal for you. Again, you're not somebody who just started into it. That was pretty normal
that was
for
and I had
time. You had that's considerable additional stress added on top of that.
Yeah, so I had a ton of stress, like business stuff, and so then I was pushing my training, and I wasn't recovering. I'll say that was the biggest thing for me is I was kind of running into those like aches and pains where you kind of need to dial it back and take like a couple of days.
What were the symptoms before the real thing? What were some of those symptoms?
Some of the tendonitis stuff that I was mentioning that kind of was on a larger scale after I had rhabdo, I was getting little bits of that before. So it was the same kind of thing, push-ups or certain things. Like I just started noticing like elbows were getting like pretty sore. I couldn't shake it. And I was getting really stiff too, which I teach mobility and do yoga. And so I thought it was just like I'm in a different like training phase right now. Like everything's just tight because I'm getting more muscle. But it was a different level of, it was almost like a stiffness. Yeah.
Did you notice that in one area more than another? Is it like, man, my hips just never feel free? Is it like my psoas always feels locked up? Was there any one point that you could kind of hit on? I know you mentioned that your abs wouldn't recover. Was it predominantly core to extremity?
I would say it was like the major joints. So it was actually like shoulder, hips, knees, elbows. Like it was kind of near like
your synovial.
You just kind of felt like it was concentrated in those areas.
Yeah, and it was, I'd foam roll, I'd do my normal stuff, and it would just be like, the one thing that typically would actually help flush it would be something like an easy like zone 2 or like a mountain bike, and it's like that would kind of get me, and I think that's what honestly was getting me through as I was doing that Sunday mountain bike ride that would kind of flush the system.
Intentionally moving but not intense. Okay. Okay.
And so that was kind of getting me through each week. And then the weekends I would get that like sleep recovery too. And so I think it was kind of like I was just holding at the threshold point at that.
Okay.
And then right before it happened though too, I was at kind of mentally the point where I was like, I need to take some time off. So then I went on vacation. I was gone for 2 weeks, jumped straight back into it. So I did have a little bit of that like drop in training, and
So when you came back, though, there wasn't any, I took 2 weeks off, so then I reduced my training by 50% on each week. You just kind of were like,
no. So that 0 to 100. And when I was gone too, like there was like some like, I went on this like crazy mountain bike ride, and then I wouldn't do anything, and then I'd go do a CrossFit workout at a random gym when I was gone. And then so when I came back, I was jet lagged and just was like, I think we were doing CrossFit Total work, so I was just.
It's like a perfect
so
storm.
It was a little bit of the 0 to 100. And I went through a bunch of doctors trying to like sort through all this, and I think perfect storm is the easiest way to say it, because I probably also had some viral thing. I was traveling for 2 weeks.
Oh yeah.
So I came back. I thought my jet lag was taking a while to like recover from. Then I thought that, I had a little bit of a cold.
Yep.
And so it was just, my body was depleted. It needed some rest. I wasn't listening. And then I was like,
I feel like that's like pretty much par for the course though with Rhabdo in the situations that I've bumped into in the past. It's like there's always like a perfect storm scenario of like all these things seem to come together.
Travel training.
Yeah.
And if you are stressed, if you are a little bit sick, like your liver and kidneys are already having to work overboard. Like they're already having to do that. And so
then you think that if you, at least I do, that if I take a day off, I'm kind of like being a baby about this. Like,
right.
I can push through this kind of thing. And maybe sometimes that's a good idea, but in this case, that was not a good idea. And in fact, what would have made it a good idea to take 2 weeks off because of our return to sport actually kind of tips you over. Got it.
Yeah.
Looking back on it, how would you navigate it differently? And for somebody that's listening, like what would be some signs that maybe that perfect storm might be brewing? Is it when those joints? It seems like all the joints are hurting and those type of things. Or what's your thoughts on that?
And your motivation. Like, did you want to come in and crush it, like in your mind, but your body wouldn't do it, or did you just not want to?
Good question. So there's 3 ones there. So motivation. My motivation was actually down, which is really unusual for me.
Really unusual.
I love working out, and so the fatigue and the mental fatigue and the like feeling like I had to force myself to go. That is not like it's. Going to the gym is one of my favorite things. And so and I generally don't have a hard time waking up. Like I love the morning. So it's like getting to go to the gym and do that. That's never been really since in college when I had to do 20 hours a week of training. I've never really had that.
And remind our listeners what you did in college.
Oh yeah. So I was a competitive diver, especially platform in college. So I was training about 20 hours a week.
Again, lends itself really well to knowing your body beyond what you do for a living, which is knowing yourself and your athlete. So we think we make all the right decisions, but when we're the one making it, it's really hard to detach from that.
Yeah.
So hard.
Yeah. So Dusty, what you were saying, going back to like, what are the things that like in hindsight, I think, and some of the like key things that I know to pay attention to now that maybe I wasn't as conscientious about then would be sleep quality for sure. I was having a lot more restlessness and just some things that were out of character for me. The way my body was responding to workouts. For me, I've been through phases of tendonitis. Like I've had that since I was in college, but it's typically like one spot. And it was tendonitis that wasn't responsive to anything, or at least that's the way it felt. Like was a tendinosis or tendonitis that was non-responsive, and almost like a little bit of swelling too. So I think that there's if you're getting a type of soreness that's different. And it's not like it doesn't correlate necessarily to the workout. So that was the thing too. It didn't necessarily. It was such full body that it didn't seem like it correlated to the work we were doing and the training.
Yeah. So you do 1 million close grip bench press, and we feel our elbows. But it's kind of like all of the things hurt all of the time kind of deal. Got it.
So I think those were the two biggest things that would have like keyed me into it, and also the fatigue, the fatigue, like daytime fatigue, things like that didn't seem consistent with.
Is that kind of like what you mentioned the last time we chatted about, almost like in the morning I'm really tired, or in the day I'm tired, but at night I'm tired and wired? Is it that same kind of feeling? Where you don't really want to, you want to sleep, but you can't?
There's going to be a crossover there, because I think that starts going into overtraining and overreaching, which I think is you start to see that shift in cortisol. So I think there's a complete crossover. I think for rhabdo specifically, it maybe isn't necessarily the case,
Okay.
but also at the same time, for how many people in kind of the fitness world, CrossFit world, rhabdo is probably going to happen because of that overreaching phase, and or taking a break, coming back in.
Got it. You mentioned the sleep part of it, and monitoring your sleep, and you mentioned wearing the ring for it. Do you recommend that you have like a sleep score that you monitor, or do you think that makes athletes more anxious because they're being scored 100% of the time?
I think that's a personal, that's a kind of know yourself kind of situation. I think the information is interesting. I think it can give you some of the stuff it gives is like heart rate variability, resting heart rate.
Yeah, I remember talking about that. Yep.
I do like that it breaks down like deep sleep and REM. And so what I've learned about myself through that is that like my resting heart rate's pretty low. It's typically around like 42. When I'm not recovered, it jumps up to like 48 or 50, which is significant enough. It's not huge, like 5 to 6 beats per minute difference, but that's enough for me to know.
That's an increase.
Yeah.
So like enough for me to know, okay, I need to like
Something's
take it
off.
easy at the gym, make sure I get a little rest, and typically within 2 days,
Yeah.
it'll recover. And then same thing with heart rate variability. You'll see like a kind of a dip in that, or you'll see your temperature go up there. So that information is interesting. And for me, I've used that to reteach myself how to gauge intensity and almost like check back in with myself, because my brain is wired with the athlete mentality of when I start noticing the like loss in the gym or not feeling as good, my instinct now at this point is, okay, I'm gonna push harder.
Yeah.
And so I'm having to retrain that, because that's not like, if you're listening to your body when it's feeling worn down, what do? You rest. Like you see a dog go outside and play and wear itself out, it goes and rests. It gets water until it recovers. Like if you want to look at how to respond to things, look at animals. Like they get wiped out, they go eat, they drink some water, they take a nap.
Yeah.
They recover, and then they go play again. Like,
would you recommend that, like, maybe you find a baseline, like, here's what my normal is, and then you as you start to maybe feel some sort of symptom, you can even dive back into it and just see if the baseline is different? Is it that simple?
Yeah, I think that you can wear it long enough to get a baseline, and then, like, some people that are type A, if they know themselves and they're going to be on that thing constantly, then it's like, I think that defeats the purpose. Because if if you wake up and you feel good, and then your thing says, oh, it's also like, well, like, there's also like technological error and just self-perception of you feel good, you want to go get a workout. Like, it's okay to go get a workout. And if you're choosing not to because your device says something, then I'm like, that's counterproductive to me.
I think we have studies out, and that's actually got a name, right? Like, I feel like we have a name for that now.
Oh, I'm sure there is.
And it's enough of a thing to have been studied, and now we have a disorder.
I'm sure there are plenty of people that are so connected or disconnected, whatever you want to call it, to like what their scores are, that they do their workouts exactly based on what that says, and probably changes their perception of how they feel. Like maybe they feel good waking up and they see their sleep scores like whatever 60% or something, and they go,
immediately,
man,
I shouldn't feel good.
Yeah. So that in that case it's not helpful, but for me it was helpful in learning some things about, and I've gotten my REM sleep back up, I've gotten my deep sleep up, and so like that piece has shifted. And then going back to what Dusty said too, like I give myself permission more to get rest, and I think that's like not going 110% all the time is like the biggest thing.
Was that a big mental shift?
Yeah, I'm still not there. Okay. I still don't like it. Okay. No, this is going to be a lifelong journey for me, I have a feeling. So, I think there's just, we talked about it last time about how routine can be so helpful in just like establishing like that like nervous system regulation. And so I'm almost over attached to my routine to the point where like I wouldn't miss. Like there's like I'm consistent. almost ingrained in who I am. Like I love that consistency. But on the other side of that, like that balance point is you've had a rough week, you're exhausted at 8 p.m. Can you turn your alarm off if you don't have kids or something to wake up to? Like, can you turn your alarm off and actually see what your body needs for a day?
And that's a form of almost like a healthy detachment. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's like for a lot of us in the exercise world, I think part of our like addiction is exercise. It is that like, or attachment to routine. We can call it addiction or attachment, but our attachment to that, it's almost that like safety and comfort and doing the same thing.
Yeah, you don't feel yourself when you're outside of that routine.
Yeah, and so I think just honestly, it's more about being in tune. And it's funny with like the work that I do and the sports that I've done, and like just how precise diving was, and like holistic health. And now I'm in this place of like, oh yeah, like, and actually the 2 injuries I've gotten, like I've had a disc herniation and then the rhabdo, and so both of those came from a place where I really was just like ignoring. Like my body was trying to throw out the flare. Like it was giving me every signal for probably like 3 months before this happened, where it was like, you need to slow down. What would that have looked like? Not a lot different. Like I probably would have taken 1 extra rest day a week and then just maybe modified the intensity a couple of days a week. Yeah. And I probably could have coasted through just fine. And so that's the thing. It's not like I had to like quit everything I was doing and just like stop working out.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, is because I think sometimes because we're mentally, we get so we thrive off of the routine and off of the results, that if we think rest is just shutting it down, and the pendulum, it doesn't have to swing that far to where it's like you can't come to the gym or you can't do any of the things that you enjoy. It just may mean that there's just adjustments that are made, but you're still doing the thing that you enjoy doing. Yeah.
And really, that would make it worse. So if you have an injury and you stop training altogether, that just makes it, generally speaking, most of the time more fragile. And you're even talking about when I lessened the intensity, but I continued to move, is when I actually felt better.
Oh yeah.
So that's a big
I think
deal.
Staying in your in much of your routine as you can also just preserves the mental. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and so that's the thing, is like, modifying it slightly and being able to like detach from that, like that rigidity in your routine. And then and I think it was like, happened in like July, August. So I had to pretty much 6 months of like having to cut way back, because I extended so long pushing through like that first rhabdo phase that it kind of kicked me into, I think, a longer recovery phase. But even in that time, it's like, at the end of the day, how much strength did I lose? Not a lot, I'd say. And like I lost a little bit of fitness, but not to the extent of like noticeable. Like it's like, okay, maybe I was doing 50 pull-ups in a session instead of 100.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's that in the grand scheme of things, like,
do you really need to be able to do 100?
Yeah, and so I think that depends on the person and what they're going for. And so, if you're going for a competition or you're training for something, then that for me says like, then I'm going to have to figure out a way to recover, to spend more time in recovery. Yeah. That's just what my body needs right now. Or I'm going to skip doing competitions for now if I'm not able to train to that intensity or whatever it is. So I think that's part of it, is just, and I mean, I'm 35, so as you increase in age, I think your recovery time increases. Yeah. Like that's just a piece of it. Like the way you jump back is a little bit different.
We talked about how to give our listeners some clear signs of what to look for, of either I'm constantly sore, I'm a weird soreness I've never had before, maybe there's a little bit of swelling, I'm not motivated to train. Some of the same things that are probably going to be precursors because I'm overtraining that could be leading to that. I don't remember if it was on our last time speaking or if it was in the book, but you said, and maybe I'm paraphrasing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you said something like the medicine we need is either in nature or our body. Based on that experience, do you still believe that?
Yeah, I mean, I think my body was like, sleep and modification would have probably been preventive.
So now we can't prevent it. We're already there. Yeah. You already were there. What did you do to be able to get back to training close to or the way that you want?
Mostly just modification. More, I had to prioritize rest.
So if you by resting, do you mean sleep more?
Sleep.
Do you mean just not necessarily sleep, but just not as much activity, like or both?
I lowered my activity a little bit. So I think I cut back to 3 days a week of CrossFit on the.
And you were doing 5.
Yeah, so you cut two days out.
I cut 2 days out, and but on one, and I was walking both of those days, and I was doing I added more breath work. And
How much were you walking?
not a ton, like a mile or two. Like it was slow pace. Like it was just more of like I basically let my nervous system like chill out. So I woke up naturally. I did some morning reading, some morning writing, did more of like mental spiritual work, then took a walk. And then I would do like a little bit of like basic yoga, some like mobility work. And then I did a little bit of accessory work at the gym. So just stuff that just felt good that wasn't high intensity.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I would work that in on the days that I took off of CrossFit workouts. And then the CrossFit workouts, when I modified those. So I'm trying to think exactly how I cut it back. I wouldn't do a lot of AMRAPs, so
you would or would?
I would not. No, I didn't do a lot of the AMRAPs at first, but I would take the movements and break them up into rounds. So say it was like a 2 movement AMRAP.
So let's explain what an AMRAP is.
Oh yeah, so as many rounds as possible in a given amount of time, and so those are pretty. You can make it as intense as you want.
You can get way out,
you could use it, but the reason I altered those was because my mindset is that 110%. Like if it's an AMRAP, like I'm going to the
you're going for broke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when those were on the board, it was like, okay. And if it was and I did diversity of movements too. So that was a way for me to say I was missing 2 days and I was like, oh man, I don't want to miss like wall balls or kettlebell swings or something.
Yeah.
I could kind of steal a couple of those, add them to the days that I was there. And so I just add like that variety and I'd just do rounds. Like I'd pick a number, do rounds. I lowered my volume.
That's really smart. That's actually why we don't do that many AMRAPs for that exact reason, because you can't really qualify athlete A and athlete B. Athlete B gets 3 rounds, but athlete A gets 20 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
Their training for the week may have been the same movements, but the volume is
significantly
radically different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was the biggest thing that I would, I'd have my days picked that I would go in and be like, oh man, I'm missing like a bunch of these movements that I really love. And I think we talked about it at one point of like the like basic movements and like trying to integrate all those, like a push, a pull, like all the different like hinge, squat.
Yeah.
So integrating those. And so I would just kind of piece together, okay, like, and also like what movements I enjoyed. If there were ones that I was missing, I was like, okay, I'm throwing that in my workout. And so I just try to have a little bit more fun with it and rotate those in. And then I would pick one workout that was going to be like my, like, okay, I'm going to go after it a little bit more today and just see. And so I just like slowly did that and then was able to like kind of cherry pick a little bit the workouts that I was going to do that gave me the variety and intensity. And slowly over time, I was able to build intensity on like 2 workouts a week. And then now I'm still in a modified phase right now, but it feels good. Like I'm working out. I'm not staying sore all the time.
You don't feel like you're losing fitness or
no, and I'm not as fit as I was. Like, I'm not exactly where I was in June of last year, but like that's okay because I also like I don't have it. Nothing is sore. Yeah. Like nothing's staying sore.
You feel good.
I feel good. I'm getting really good sleep, and so it's like technically is my fitness like on paper. Like if you were to take some, like it's probably a little bit less. Like I'm not going quite as fast.
You gave a little up.
Like, so it's like area. Like what is that? And that's more probably my ego, to be completely honest. It's like but that's in the grand scheme of things, how do I want to feel in my life? And I'm still really strong and like I can go through day to day without like I pick up my massage table for work, and I was at the point where I could like barely pick that thing up last summer because I was so wiped. I was exhausted.
Wow.
And so it's like cool. I could work out really hard for an hour in the morning, but then like
total trash for the rest of the day.
And so then it's like, what's the trade-off?
And that's what you mentioned the last time. I think we said, what are you tuning your central nervous system to? Mm-hmm. And you were kind of tuning it to everything was this one workout, even though it affected the rest of the day. And
mm-hmm.
that was essentially just a big conglomeration of every workout that came before it and a whole bunch of symptoms that we tend to ignore as athletes.
And I think you can work out that hard. It's just it's in seasons and phases, and it's like, and it's also like, in consideration of everything else that's going on in your life. Just like, are you like, what's your stress level like? How is everything else
Is it a
together?
good time?
Yeah, is it a good time? And then knowing when to push and when not to. And I think that's just maybe something that I knew about myself, but now I know a lot better, is that they're, especially in a group environment, like, and the music's on, like, the competitor in me is just like, and it is like getting one extra rep is, and I think not everyone's wired that way. Like, I think that a lot of former athletes are, though. We're wired to, like,
100%.
You put everything on the line, and it's just, it's almost like there's two intensities. It's like super easy light, or like everything you have, it's like all on the table, like it's your last workout.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And so I think that's an interesting thing, is like figuring out how to gauge that. And I'll actually go back to one other thing that really helped was I worked with Zach, that's been on the show, the breathwork coach, because I switched to nasal breathing only. And that was a way to actually gauge and control my intensity, because it was like, okay, if you have to switch to mouth breathing, then you can't.
So you mean during a workout, you would only let yourself breathe through your nose?
Yeah. So for a full month we did, and I was interested in doing that anyway. And so I was like, well, now's the time, because like I'm so tired, I can barely do anything. So I'll start building up, and I can focus on something I really care about and I've wanted to try.
Explain to us how that works and how that feels.
Oh gosh. So Zach would be better at this, but so basically your ability to get oxygen, I think when you switch to mouth breathing, we all do that in a workout, as intensity goes up, heart rate goes up, like, which
isn't a bad thing.
No,
right.
Not a bad thing at all. Completely normal. Like but if you switch over to nasal breathing only, you can basically optimize the way your body gets oxygen. So when you do that for an extended period of time, then when you switch back to that like mouth breathing, you're making it more efficient. Mm-hmm. So you're basically changing your tolerance to CO2 in the process, and how you exercise, and what your exercise tolerance is. And so
because breathing is always trying to offload carbon. That's what we're basically trying to do. And if you will breathe through the nose, you're encouraging the central nervous system to sort of downregulate a little bit, to not be so uppity and so stressed.
Yep.
Okay.
And so, but when you get that like response to breathe, and especially when the heart rate goes up, you want to just start like sucking in oxygen. So if you make yourself nasal breathe only, essentially you can't do.
It's a natural regulator.
First, you can't do as much intensity. So like I was having to like take plates off. Like it was. Yeah. And it's also a good way to control heart rate too, because I was trying to like kind of gradually increase the zones I was going into. I had to stay out of zone 4, zone 5 for a while. So it was.
That's what I was going to ask is what if you had a rate of perceived exertion, your RPE was 10 in a workout, let's say, what were you going with? But with nasal breathing, I mean, is it even possible to get to like a 5?
No, I mean, I was doing one thing Zach had me do. It was like you basically do sprints on the bike, 5. So just you kind of breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, and then you do breath hold and sprint for 5 seconds.
With no oxygen.
With no oxygen after the exhale.
That hurts.
And you would do that basically for repeats. And you would say, like, at first you think just holding your breath for 5 seconds is like nothing. But every time I got to the 5th second, I would just... Like, because you're trying, it was crazy how much of a, like, demand that is. I mean, your whole body's flushing with lactate at that, like. Yeah. And I'm sure there are people, like, when you continue your training, people are able to build off of that. But.
So what I would do is I would close my mouth, I would take in a full breath, and then I would breathe out all of my air through my nose, hold that, and then go for 5 hard seconds, and then not open my mouth, though, when I breathe. Well,
he actually had you do normal breathing, so for, say, 30 seconds in and out, and then on the 30, after the exhale, then you hold after the exhale.
And then a 5 hard second sprint.
And then as soon as the 5 hard second sprint, and as soon as the 5 seconds is over, back to nasal breathe, in and out of the nose, and so you're recovering.
Yeah, that sounds horrible.
Like, yeah,
that
sounds horrible.
And you just do that a few times, and it shows you how much, like, how much of a difference it is, like, in workouts. And so I did that for a while. I did that for probably a month or 6 weeks or so. And that was a way where it was like, it basically paced my whole workout.
That's a really easy way to set up a recovery pace.
Yeah.
Maybe not easy is the correct word, but a really smart way to set
it. It helped me a lot, because it was just, it gave my mind something to be like, okay, if I'm going to have to start breathing in and out, whether it was in or out, using my mouth at all, because you can also do modified breath work where you're like taking a deep breath through the nose, out through the mouth, or vice versa, as kind of like a step in between in and out through the nose and doing full mouth breathing. And so it's cool because you can kind of see like how that pairs with the zones too. Like,
Yeah.
But that was a really helpful thing. And I'll probably, like, you know, next time I get sick or something or have to take a break, use that as a way to just like modify my intensity too.
Yeah.
Because what's neat about that is it changes your cardio capacity. And so after like you do that kind of training, all of a sudden you're like, you start breathing out your mouth, you're like, man, I feel really good.
Yeah.
So see, that's kind of like what you were talking about. Like you kind of took a step back, but in the long run, if you're playing the long game,
You come out ahead.
Yeah, you're way ahead.
That was what I was
Yeah.
going to ask you, because you're
Sorry.
you're almost a year.
Yeah, I guess
a year
it-
out,
yeah,
coming up on
summer.
it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how do you feel like now? How do you feel overall? Do you feel like, what were your takeaways from that?
I mean, I feel good now. I like the way that I feel. I still feel strong, and I like that. I'm not stiff all the time, and I've got a little bit better read of my body.
Yeah.
And so I feel like mentally and physically, I'm in a better place.
Yeah,
Just kind of that like all around picture.
you're just a little bit more in tune with
Yeah.
kind of just how to gauge.
And if I wanted
when you
to,
need some rest and when's the time to push, and
yeah, and I feel like I've got a new routine that feels good. It just took some time to adjust. I think that's just human nature, is not wanting to have to adapt or change.
Yeah.
But I think for all of us, that's like in the long game, like we're going to face challenges that we're going to have to adapt and like find that resilience, and figure out how to like navigate and still not give up the things we love, but like modify them and make them work for us. So
having gone through that, gave you a different vocabulary to address with your athletes and your patients?
yeah, I think we actually talked about it a little bit at the beginning of all this, was that like, and I don't think there's a answer to this, but like, where's that line between surrender and resilience when it comes to like, or surrender and grit? And that's the like, I think that's like, that is the hard part of this, is because it feels like giving up when you stop doing the things. Like it feels like you're weak. It feels like you're like, it feels like you're doing something
failing.
wrong or you're failing. And so knowing to like, that maybe your body needs something different, maybe your mind needs something different, it like is like a surrender into that, and it's like, if you can give yourself curiosity around that instead of feeling like defeated or like you're becoming weak or lazy, like all those negative words that we have, because there is also like, especially I think in the world we live in, when what we're seeing is there is a need for resilience, there is a need for grit, there is a need for pushing through. And I think especially for people that, I've not gone through it, but people have gone through, you know, Parkinson's diagnosis or things where like true like physical mental challenges where their body is really drastically changing, or cancer, or things that I'm sure you guys have both seen a lot in the fitness world. And so, you know, that takes a lot of adaptation, and there are things where we need to wake up when we don't want to. And so I think that's the gray area around all this, is that some of it is always a guessing game, but it's not a hurt in trying. And so if you're not feeling good in your training, like you're feeling fatigued all the time, like modify things, try some rest, like try different movements. There's something around just being curious of getting like stuck and fixated on like where you are.
Yeah.
Well, you said that either coming back from overtraining or from a diagnosis like you had, it was you took roughly 30% of the intense workouts away completely. You took 2 days out of the 5.
Yeah.
And then you talked about you were nasal breathing, which drastically, maybe 60% reduced the intensity of each workout.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that you would leave with our listeners that are overtrained, overreached, or they hear this and they're like, yeah, I can feel that? Is there any other thing that you would add? And maybe it doesn't have to do with the workout. Maybe it was just make sure you get 9 hours of sleep. Make sure you sleep in the dark. Was there anything else that you think helped you?
Yeah, I think one more thing about the workouts was actually going back to like pretty lightweight and just having more fun with it. So it was like, it felt really nice on certain things to be like, I'm going to drop the weight to like 65 pounds and just like let it feel good and practice technique again.
Focus
like,
more on the movement and less.
Yeah, focus on the movement and and just, we get so focused on like the strength pace and the strength piece and then getting better, especially when we're kind of doing closer to our heavier weight or 1 rep max. And it's like, when you get the opportunity to go back and like work on things.
Yeah.
And so I think part of it is like find fun and curiosity and like play again, like get so serious about it like all the time. And it's like, wait a second, I actually do love working out. And like, and you told me this a long time ago, but like focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. And that mentality switch is like, I think about that all the time when I get like whatever it is, because I think our nature is to go like, to be so frustrated. I'm like, oh, I used to be able to do this. I used to do that. Like, I can't do this. And it's like, but how many things can I actually do right now?
Yeah.
And then outside of gym space, I think it's the same kind of thing, just giving yourself permission and freedom to like rest, go to a park, like get outside, like live life, be in nature, like do things, like you can still move your body. Like that's like, so it's just perspective shift. So
Jill, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
That was great.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Yeah.